Good morning. I'm Bob Ames, and I'm the director of the Kelvin Center for Innovation in Business at Kelvin University. And I'm so pleased to welcome all of you this morning to this episode in our executive breakfast series. As you know, we're not serving you breakfast this morning, so I hope you've all got coffee and whatever you want to eat at home this morning or in your offices, wherever you're joining us from. But we're just glad that you're here today. I just want to remind you that this series is brought to you by the Kelvin Center for Innovation in Business, the Career Center at Kelvin University, and also by our Kelvin Alumni Association. And we're just pleased today to bring you this important talk on families balancing on the brink, the future of poverty. As is our custom at Kelvin, I'd like to open this event with a word of prayer. So please join me. Father God, we just give you thanks this morning for all of the many ways that your love for us is so abundantly clear. In the middle of this cold season, you provide us with warm places to live and work. You've blessed us with technology that enables us to connect to each other without having to go outside and start our cars and travel on the icy roads. And Lord, we're amazed and pleased for that. And Lord, we're grateful too for the love that you show for us in so many ways, but especially through each other. And we're thankful that we're able to be together virtually this morning, and we gather in your name. Amen. To kick us off this morning, I want to turn the program over to Dr. Neil Carlson, who will introduce our speaker. Neil is the director of the Kelvin Center for Social Research, and he'll be both moderating today's event and introducing our speaker. So Neil, why don't you take it away?
Thanks, Bob. It's a privilege to be here. Along with the Center for Social Research team, I have the privilege of working with the Michigan Association of United Way's Research Advisory Council for the isALICE project, which Michelle will be talking to us about. I've had the privilege of meeting and observing Michelle VanDyke in her official role as president and CEO since she joined the heart of West Michigan United Way in January of 2016. Michelle excels in her role as a coordinator and resource for collective impact work. Along with overseeing United Way's core work as a fundraiser and a grant maker, she serves on the boards of trustees of K-Connect, First Steps Kent, Davenport University, and Fifth Third Bank, where she was president of the mortgage business before coming to the United Way. She also embraces her role as fiduciary for the Kent County Essential Needs Task Force, a network of agencies that make frequent use of the data Michelle's about to present. We hope you will share your questions with us today. We'll do our best to answer them. Please submit them using the chat feature in Vimeo. On the right-hand side of your Vimeo video player, you will see an option to type in your name and accept Vimeo's terms with a little checkbox. Once you've done that, you'll be able to submit your questions in the chat or try out the new Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the chat pane, which will allow other viewers to vote up your question if that's working well. With that, I'd like to welcome you, Michelle. Thank you for making time to join us today and ask you to take it away.
Thanks so much, Neil, and thanks for inviting me to be here with you today to talk about poverty and families that live on the brink. When someone says poverty, we often think of the indigent hunkered down in the entryway of a building with a shopping cart of worldly possessions, a tin cup, and a sign that says, "Please help." And I hope that today I can open your eyes to true poverty. It's closer to home than you may believe. Until 5 years ago, I was a bank executive looking out the third floor corner window at the streets of Grand Rapids, Michigan. There was hustle and bustle, commerce was happening, people were moving to and from their places of employment, traffic was backed up because of construction, and I had no idea of the truth. I had not met Alice yet. When I retired to my second career as president and CEO at Heart of West Michigan United Way, I met Alice. Alice is any gender, any race, any age. Alice is those who are asset limited, income constrained, employed. Yes, Alice is working, often 2 or 3 jobs, but having a difficult time making ends meet. Alice lives in any and every zip code. Alice is many people who work with you or for you. Alice could be family members. Alice could be the child that plays with yours on the playground. The truth is, over the last decade, behind the veneer of a strong economy, conditions worsened for millions of Americans. In 2018, 42% of United States households could not afford the cost of household basics. That's 51 million households. 13% earned below the federal poverty level, and 29%, or 35 million households, were Alice. Let me introduce you to Alice through a short simulation experience we call Making Ends Meet. Imagine who you know in your own life that needs to make these kinds of decisions. We're going to be Kara and Eric, who are a small family, 2 young children. And we're going to pay attention to not only the money that they have in the bank, but also their stress level, because that's a very real thing for families who live on the brink. So on day 1 of this month, you can see our rent is due and we've got to pay $1,100. Rent's oftentimes the largest expense that somebody has for the month, and can be 50% or more of their total income. On day 2, we have to go grocery shopping, and we're only going to be able to afford to make a small trip, even though we know we're going to need more groceries than that throughout the month, but that's all we can afford. Oftentimes, families have to make sacrifices between what's healthy and what's unhealthy, but the healthier food costs more, so they tend to pick the most unhealthy food. We've got bills that we have to pay, $200. Our stress level goes up a little more. Cell phones can be very expensive, but they're a lifeline for so many in the Alice category. Our brother calls, and that feels good. It's great to connect with him, and our stress level goes back down. Not all days are bad. There's some really good things that happen to Alice families. But now we've got an issue because our usual daycare, our grandmother, is sick, and we either have to stay home from work, which means $280 loss, or have a neighbor help, but increases stress a little bit. And we're going to have to do that because you can see we are like just about ready to run out of money. So we're going to have our neighbor help. Childcare can be extremely stressful for families who live in the Alice category. It's the weekend. We'd love to be able to take a little trip with the kids, but we do not have enough to fill up our gas tank. We're going to have to stay home, but that adds a little bit of stress. It's very difficult to take a break from normal life. The 1-year-old's not feeling well. We're not sure what to do. We could either go to the doctor or we could just get medicine over the counter. I think we're going to have to go to the doctor, although we're really running low on money, but we need to make sure that he's okay. So we'll do that. Paying for doctor's visits is expensive, even when you have health insurance, because you've got co-pays and prescriptions that need to be paid for. Kara's in the running for a new promotion, and we're going to celebrate, but we're going to do it as cheaply as we possibly can with a barbecue in the backyard. We're running low on food. We know we would be. We don't have money to go to the grocery store. We're going to call 211 and get connected to a local food pantry. 211 is a call center, a health and human services line that helps connect families to resources, any basic need resources in the community. The son's birthday, first birthday is coming up. What kind of party are we going to have? That's a hard decision, but he's only a year old and he's not going to know the difference. So we're only going to buy him a couple of gifts. And we're running really low in our bank account. So birthdays are just going to add additional stress to that. Okay, it's time for grocery shopping again. It's $50 less this month because we went to the food pantry, but we don't have money to make a full trip. We're going to have to do another small trip to the grocery store. It's only day 11 and now day 12, not even to the middle of the month yet, and our car is making a really weird noise. We have no way to get it fixed. We don't have enough money. You can see $60 in our account. We're going to have to wait it out and increase our stress level. Transportation, especially when it's unreliable, can really increase unexpected costs. Spring allergies are acting up. We can either stay home from work. We can't afford that. We have $60 in the bank. We're going to have to refill our inhaler and live on the edge a little bit here. Health issues, again, incredibly stressful for these families. Thank goodness we made it to payday. It's the middle of the month and we got paid, so we're replenished, but our car broke down and we're going to have to pay for repairs. That's $400, and you can see our stress level is high. Putting off car repairs obviously helps in the short term, but in the long term is very expensive. The daughter got an A on her spelling test. That's great. Reduces our stress a little bit. We're so proud of her, but our internet bill is due on day 17. We're going to have to pay that. Day 18 is just a regular day. Again, there are good days for ALICE families. Well, Kara got the promotion, and that's great news. The raise is worth $1,120 a month, but it's going to cost $1,000 a month to add 2 days of childcare. Does she go for the promotion? I think she has to, even though we know that finding childcare is going to be very, very expensive and add to the stress level. They have trade-offs. Promotions have many trade-offs, especially when you're making more money. It can push families out of the area where they earn assistance. The 5-year anniversary, do we get a babysitter and go to dinner? Nope, we're just going to have to eat at home. We don't have a lot of extra money. Day 21 is a regular day, another day of no costs or benefits. Our gas tank is low. We can either take the bus to work or fill up the tank. We're going to have to fill up the tank. I think we have money for it. The uncle has died, and we either need to take a day off of work for the funeral or miss the funeral. I don't think the stress we're going to be able to handle, so we're going to have to take a day off to go to the funeral. Sudden tragedies really impact these ALICE families, cause tremendous hardship on them. The sisters come in town to go to the funeral, have her over for dinner, or go to coffee. Well, we're going to have her over for dinner. We certainly don't want her to think that we don't have enough money. Work clothes are getting a little worn out. Time to buy some shirts and pants. Well, not that we can really afford it, but we also don't want people at work thinking ill of us. So we're going to get some new clothes. And should we save for retirement? Boy, it's $50 a paycheck. We don't really have the money for that, but everybody tells us we should be saving for retirement. We're going to do that. And day 27 is just a regular day. The daughter is invited to a birthday party. Again, a tremendous amount of stress. If she doesn't go, and if she goes, we have to buy a birthday gift. We're going to have to do that. We don't want her to miss the birthday party. And then we have a credit card balance, and the creditor is calling. Do we hang up and avoid them again, which would cause a tremendous amount of stress, and I'm not sure we'd be able to survive that. Or do we answer and pay the minimum payment? I think we're going to have to do that and just really put stress on our bank account. It's really difficult to balance bank accounts and debts. When a creditor calls and pushing you to overcommit and drain the bank account, it's really, really difficult. But we made it to payday, day 30, and we're back. So it's great news. We're done and we're through the month. So it's really the core of the problem is this simple fact: the cost of household basics is higher than the wages of most common occupations. We are talking about real basics here. Not going out to eat, not putting away a percentage of a paycheck into savings, not throwing your child a birthday party. The ALICE Household Survival Budget reports the cost of the essentials: housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, and a smartphone plan, plus taxes, that are needed to live and work in the modern economy. Family 1 and Family 2 that you see here was some of the most common occupations in the United States. Retail sales, food preparation, office clerk, and cashier do not earn enough to support the family household survival budget for a family of 4. This is really difficult to read, but let me interpret it for you. This graph shows that the mismatch between household income and expenses holds true across the United States. For each state, the gold square shows the average percentage of households below the ALICE threshold in 2018. The blue line for each state shows the lowest to highest range of the percentage of households below the ALICE threshold by county. Michigan is right in the middle, number 26, with 40% of our households living below the ALICE threshold in 2018. By 2019, it's up to 43%. 28% of those living in Kent County are ALICE. The largest number of ALICE households are white and older working age, but even more striking is the way that poverty impacts groups with a specific identity marker. 60% of Black households, 77% of single female headed households, 50% of seniors, and 70% of those under age 25. Now think about your workforce or your family or your neighbors. How many single moms do you have working for you? What about those under age 25? How many Black or Hispanic employees or teammates do you have? Chances are they're ALICE. One of the largest employers in West Michigan discovered recently, as United Way began to introduce ALICE, that they had employees living in their cars in the parking lot. They immediately put a plan in place to assist these employees in finding housing and reviewing compensation levels to ensure living wages. That's one of the biggest challenges for employers: how and why to pay a living wage. From 2007 to 2018, the average annual rate of increase in the ALICE Essentials Index, measuring those basic needs we talked about, was 3.4%, compared with a CPI increase of 1.8%. This difference is primarily due to the fact that the cost of essentials like housing and healthcare have increased, while the cost of other items that ALICE households are less likely to buy, notably manufactured goods like cars and apparel, have remained relatively flat. The increase in the cost of these basic goods may not be noticed by many consumers, but for ALICE households, it means that their already stretched income covers even less. ALICE's wages have not kept pace with rising costs. For example, from 2007 to 2018, ALICE workers in retail sales saw their wages increase only 1.7%, about half the rate at which the ALICE Essentials Index grew. The impact is even starker for those who also depend on public assistance. Families with children reliant on supplemental nutrition program for women with infants and children, or those with a disability who rely on supplemental security income, are seeing the value of their benefits erode over time as costs rise. In August 2019, I met a 21-year-old woman, let's call her Anne, who came to speak at a housing system redesign meeting that I was attended. She had 2 college degrees, a job paying less than $10 an hour, and was living in her car. I invited her to lunch, and in all of my wisdom and with my CEO voice, I said, "You need to put those college degrees to work." The look on her face was one that I cannot describe to you. She responded, "How can I hold down a professional job when I don't even know I'll be able to shower in the morning?" Anne needed housing. Okay, this was going to be a relatively simple fix. I'd help her find an affordable apartment. Well, what I didn't know is that to get an apartment, you have to have 1 month security deposit, plus the first month's rent, and proof that you make 3 times the rent amount each month. Well, I have connections and resources. I'd figure it out. I searched for weeks, made more phone calls than I can count, never got returned phone calls from landlords, found places that were $900+ a month for a studio. We finally got a break from a compassionate private landlord with a studio apartment for $700 a month. There were hundreds of phone calls within the first hour of the apartment being posted on Facebook Marketplace. There were that many people who went through the open house. Anne was the first one there, and she told him her story. I talked to him later that night and promised the security deposit, first month's rent, and half the monthly rent for the first year. She got the apartment, but without an advocate, that would not have happened. There are thousands of Anns in Kent County, multiplied by every county in the country. The cost of housing and other basic needs is out of reach for many ALICE households. It is a barrier that is almost insurmountable. Another challenge for ALICE is that most of the wage growth over the last decade was in low-wage jobs, defined as jobs that cannot support the family household survival budget with 2 earners. In fact, 61% of all jobs in Michigan today pay less than $20 an hour, and a family of 4 needs $30.64 an hour to cover the cost of basic needs. Here too, there are significant disparities by race, ethnicity, and gender. Women earn 19% less than men. Black and Hispanic workers earn 37% and 22% less than white non-Hispanic workers. Younger earners earn less than older workers, and income rises with education level. And even more so today, increasing numbers of low-wage workers are unemployed, and millions of workers are filing for unemployment. Many of these households rely on the annual earned income tax credit to pay bills, but with unemployment, earned income is decreased, so the credit will be decreased, and this is going to put an additional hardship on these ALICE families. During periods of economic volatility, employers shift risk to employees. Hourly and contract workers have little or no protection, have to absorb costs for their own health insurance, or go without other benefits, such as paid time off and retirement savings. This set the stage for the dual health and economic crises of COVID-19. ALICE workers are the most vulnerable to immediate impacts of economic disruption due to COVID-19. The digital divide makes it harder for ALICE to work from home. ALICE is more likely to work in industries like food, hospitality, and tourism that have experienced high rates of unemployment and reduced wages. Women and communities of color are most significantly impacted. There are added costs of the crisis, like health and transportation. Also, as many as 45% of workers have 1 or more side hustles to make ends meet, and many of those opportunities are closed due to social distancing. Another challenge is that low wages make it impossible to save, yet they're often just high enough to keep families from receiving public assistance. As a result, many ALICE families suffer from a vicious cycle of budget shortfalls. A failure to pay bills on time leads to fees, penalties, and low credit scores, which in turn increase interest rates, insurance rates, and the cost of other financial transactions like check cashing and credit card fees. The costs of financial instability are cumulative and intensify over time. While ALICE families are not earning enough to afford essentials, their earnings are often too high to qualify for assistance. Only a small fraction of struggling families receive public assistance. 29% of households below the ALICE threshold received assistance from Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, in 2018, down from 34% in 2012. An even smaller portion receive supplemental security income or temporary assistance to needy families. Without access to public assistance, ALICE families are left to make difficult and often heart-wrenching choices about how to make ends meet. Today, more households are on the edge of that ALICE threshold than before the Great Recession. These families are one crisis: a rent increase, a car breakdown, a decrease in work hours, away from becoming ALICE. Today, there are 9 million households in the United States that are sitting on the brink of becoming ALICE. Faced with reduced wages and unemployment during COVID-19, these households could now, in fact, be ALICE. That would bring the total share of households below the ALICE threshold to 50%, half of all U.S. households facing financial hardship. I realize I've shared a lot of sobering statistics, but I want to talk about what do we do? How do we close the gap between those that live below the ALICE threshold and those that are financially stable? There are barriers to and facilitators of financial stability and factors that work to widen or close the gap between living below the ALICE threshold and being financially stable. But there are ways to get there and close that gap. We need to work in collaboration and not in silos. Issues are complex and they demand complex solutions. We have to include ALICE at the table. Their voices need to be heard. We need to use ALICE measures instead of just the federal poverty level. We have to make data-informed decisions at many different levels: state and local government, federal agencies, business, nonprofits, philanthropy. We need to use an equity lens. The racial disparities are striking and unjust. And we need to advocate for programs and assistance that will help families move out of ALICE. Let me give you some examples. I'll first finish the story about Anne. She's had the studio apartment for 1.5 years, probably the longest she's ever lived anywhere. She's employed in a full-time position with health benefits. She has food to eat, a car that doesn't break down at every stoplight, and peace of mind. She's still ALICE, but she's building her life up to move out of ALICE very soon. And let me introduce you to Jasmine. She's an example of ALICE who, working with collaborative agencies in Kent County, including United Way, made her way above the ALICE threshold. She and her family are now thriving. Watch this video.
I was in Muskegon and I was working at a factory there, but I just felt like I was stuck and couldn't move up, down, anywhere else.
I can't, no.
Once they were born, it was pretty hard to handle because of the situation that I was in. I did have support, not as much, but I did have support. And then once I figured out that I was kind of forced to move out of Muskegon, I just packed everything up, including them, and we were gone. I actually had to go to Salvation Army Food Family Services, and then that's when they connected me over to the homeless shelter. And that was before I was introduced to WMCAT. WMCAT was very different because it just didn't feel like a school. It felt more like a family and a support system. It kind of gave me the motivation and to know that I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that feels this way. My counterparts, my team members, my friends, my support system are all on the same page. And the fact that we're getting it, that moment goes from you can't really do that to, oh, I know I can. And that moment feels great. It feels really great because you're mentally changing the way you view things and you view things in the world. So, and then you're giving yourself confidence. And so I think that's what WMCAT provided, is self-confidence as well. I was still trying to figure out my whole living situation. And the crazy thing is, people were telling me at WMCAT, we had a couple of students, and they would tell me, go ahead and get with Habitat. So the first time I came on the construction site, my first job was caulking. I never knew nothing about caulking, construction, or anything like that. So I did have a lot of people that were there that was supporting too, and not looking at me like, oh, you don't know how to do that. They were all supporting. So I was just told what areas to go ahead and caulk, and I caulked it all. I'm not gonna lie, I did cry at signing my papers, put my name on the deed. But walking in, it was just amazing because it was a little surreal, because I was like, I remember being here. I remember being here, not actually having a key, getting a key and actually coming into the home. It was like, this is mine. This is actually mine, and I own it. It's not anything that I rent. It's something that I own, and it's mine. The way everything happened, I feel like it was for a reason, and I just expressed a lot of gratitude over it. Because Habitat and WMCAT both prepared me for life and what I needed to know. They both gave me the utensils I needed to go into my career with WMCAT and to know what it takes to own a home with Habitat. What I would tell myself, my 10 years ago self, is to get up, girl, because you can do it. You can do it. Find out what drives you. Find out what motivates you, which is the boys, and go for it and do it.
There are many Anns and Jasmines in this country, in this state, in this county. Organizations like Heart of West Michigan United Way are coordinating efforts to ensure these families are able to thrive, not simply survive, living their best lives. Please, if you haven't already, get to know ALICE. The work I am doing now and have been doing for the past 5 years has been the most rewarding, God-glorifying work I have done in all of my career. Thank you for taking the time to get introduced to ALICE this morning.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for that presentation. All of you watching, please use the Vimeo chat feature or ask a question feature to submit your questions, and I'll be seeing them passed on to me by our backstage capable tech crew. Michelle, I want to start by following up on what you just said about the God-glorifying nature of the work you've been doing. We're called as Christians to minister to the poor personally and to make sacrifices ourselves. And yet many well-to-do folks like you and me are learning a lot these days about structural injustice and systemic issues. Can you say something about what we should do as individuals and how that plays into the system we find ourselves in?
Yeah, thanks, Neil. First of all, I would say, not everyone is called to go from being a CEO of a large corporation to running a nonprofit. I was clearly called and answered that call. But there are other things that individuals can do, from broadening understanding and vision of who's around us. As I said, I had no idea that there were folks that were working that were actually struggling to meet their basic needs until I got to United Way and I could see. And so I had a much broader understanding of the people who are around me and how my neighbors and in a lot of cases, my own family members were living and struggling. So I think it's important first that we understand. There are ways to do that, and one is through volunteering, and you and I do that on a number of different boards. Others can get involved in areas where they have a passion. If you have a passion for feeding kids or a passion for education and want to tutor, there are opportunities for you to get involved to help these families, these individuals really build a better life, and as we say, really thrive and not just survive day to day. But also, engaging with the community through making gifts, and monetary treasure is also important, as well as time. But I think it's really clear that using your time and your treasure, but broadening that understanding is really important.
Thanks, Michelle. We have a couple of questions. I think I'd like to stitch them together. They have policy or structural implications. One question is, what's more effective in messaging, a living wage description or a firm hourly number, just naming a threshold in terms of a wage level? And I think that could be linked to the next question, which is about the effects that a proposed federal minimum wage of $15 an hour might have on ALICE. Can we hold those two together, do you think?
Probably, yeah. I think when we talk about ALICE, we're not necessarily talking about a minimum wage as we are a household survival budget. So we look at it as if it's a single earner or there's double earner in the household, here's what they need to make in order to pay for their basic needs, essentially get over that ALICE threshold. And that's that $30.64 number that I talked about. So the minimum wage, obviously a political issue, but that weaves into this, as employers think about what do we need to do to sustain a living wage, to understand what it takes for our employees to meet their basic needs so that they're not struggling. And it goes beyond just how much do we pay them for an hour's worth of work, but also what benefits do we offer to them? Do they have health insurance? Do they have paid time off, so that when there is an uncle's funeral that they have to go to, that they're not making a decision about do I take time off of work and not get paid and go to the funeral, or do I miss it and just add a tremendous amount of stress to my life? I think it's important we understand those two components, and there's a lot of decisions that need to be made really in totality when we're looking at employees and the benefits that they get.
How about churches, Michelle? What role would you say they are playing and should play?
Yeah, I think obviously, in the churches that we go to, there's a lot of benevolence, and that's a wonderful role for churches to play. I would also say that churches can help by not perpetuating that bootstrap mentality myth, and we've probably all thought it if we haven't said it, boy, just, pick themselves up by the bootstraps and move on. It is not that easy. This is not a choice. This is not laziness. In a lot of cases, these are really hardworking people that are just struggling to make ends meet. So, I think, again, they can help building that awareness and the education of their congregants. I think too, listening first. I say, bring ALICE to the table. Let's understand, what does ALICE really need versus us who don't struggle to make ends meet, thinking I know and that I've got the answers. It's really important to hear their voice, and then invite in programs that work to end poverty to speak, and again, raising that awareness. And I think too, providing volunteer opportunities for parishioners is always important. I find that when a person is more connected to the mission of an organization, they understand it better and are more likely to want to be involved.
I love the point about the church functioning with a little intellectual humility about how to turn theology into public policy and recommendations for individuals who need benevolence. We have a couple of questions I think could also be linked together here. One is about statistics on executive compensation and how it's increased in the past few decades relative to ALICE. And I think that plays into a larger question of just how did we get here as a country, as a state, as a county? And the executive pay question is one of many of those trends that answer the question of how we got here.
Yeah.
What do you point to as fundamental causes and issues?
Well, I think there are many. As we've said, this is a very complex issue. Certainly the executive compensation, or that's a difficult one to debate. That is what it is. I think what we can point to going back hundreds of years is systemic racism in our systems, and really just in the way that our neighborhoods have been set up, our school systems are funded. This goes way, way back. So, we can't point a finger at anyone or anything and say we've got an issue, but there are factors that are creating this economic and education achievement gap, especially for people of color. And I talked a lot about those disparities, and those are real. And as I said, they're unjust. And so, a lot of factors go into that, but I think now it's up to us to figure out how do we overcome those and break down those barriers, really start to get more equitable outcomes for these families of color and individuals of color who are just behind in terms of achievement in education and also in financial stability.
You want to say something about, I want to thank you for the role that United Way played in producing the video about racial disparities in the homelessness system.
Yes.
So I know United Way plays host to the Continuum of Care, the COC, the Coalition to End Homelessness here in Kent County. What role do you see the housing affordability and homelessness systems playing in this?
We have a housing first approach, which I didn't take with my friend Anne, and I should have. It's a housing first approach means we get people into housing and then we solve other issues, because once they're stably housed, we can really start to attack some of the other complex issues in their lives. What we found through this housing work, sadly, is that 1 in 6 African American children touched the homeless system last year versus 1 in 130 white children. So think about for just a second, 1 in 6 African American children touching the homeless system, and what that trauma does to them at a very early age. They're not going to succeed in school when they don't know where they're going to sleep at night. We know that. We know that they're not getting nutritious food to eat because there is no kitchen to prepare it in. And so, thinking about, how do we solve that issue? And again, it's a disparate outcome issue. We have a much greater homeless experience for people of color than we do for white families. But just across the board in the whole spectrum of housing, from not housed to stably housed, we need more intervention by agencies working in the prevention space. We need more access to affordable housing. I mean, there are issues across the board. United Way obviously plays a small part in that with our continuum of care. But there are people throughout that spectrum that need to get engaged in the housing work in Kent County to alleviate this issue, because it's a huge one.
We have a question about another important disparity that one of the shocking things to me about the time I met you, I was being exposed to just how steep the political cliff is here in Kent County between the urban center and some of the suburbs and the periphery of the county. What about urban and rural distinctions in the ALICE factor? How how do you see that playing into the causal forces and maybe the remedial work that United Way is doing?
Yeah, there's actually very little difference between that ALICE Essentials Index in rural areas versus urban. So the costs are rising at about the same rate, although certainly today in downtown Grand Rapids, so what we would typically consider our urban core, costs are increasing exponentially, especially for housing. And so we're seeing more and more people moving out to the suburbs where the cost of housing is becoming more expensive, supply and demand. And I studied economics at Calvin, and that's, it's a true thing. And then we also see that transportation costs rise as people move out into the suburbs. We don't have great public transportation in Kent County. And so the reliance on the bus isn't there. They've got to purchase cars. And so it's just, it again, compounds, and the complexity of this issue is incredible. So, certainly we love to see what's happening in downtown Grand Rapids. What we don't realize is what this is doing to families that are truly struggling every day to figure out whether they can pay their rent or fix their car or buy diapers for their child.
I want to call attention, since you mentioned public transportation and transportation issues, to the Essential Needs Task Force Subcommittee on Transportation, which I think is an underappreciated function here in Kent County.
Yeah, absolutely. The Essential Needs Task Force actually does a great job, and there are 5 different subcommittees that they're working with, really understanding the needs of those in this community in a lot of different areas, including public transportation, and serving as a liaison with places like the Rapid, and understanding what the needs are in the community and helping to connect the dots so that we can start to solve some of these issues.
We have a question about advocacy groups working with employers to address ALICE in their workforces. And our questioner is aware of the work of The Source, for example. What's your experience been with advocacy and support organizations?
Yeah, United Way, the Michigan Association of United Way, which you work with, Neil, does a lot of the advocacy for us, especially around ALICE, and advocating in Lansing and in Washington for ALICE families. At a local level, United Way doesn't do a lot of advocacy, although the Essential Needs Task Force does, and is taking more of that on. And then obviously as their employer of record, we are also then in that game as well. There are nonprofits who do advocacy work. I think one of the things that I recognized is that it's really difficult for single nonprofits to get a loud enough voice to make a difference, and really banding together and collectively speaking, especially through like the Essential Needs Task Force and other networks, really gives them more power.
For any of our viewers who aren't familiar with them, The Source is an organization that enrolls employers as members for social work type support for ALICE. So for example, if a car fails to start, instead of losing your job because you're late, your employer can draw on The Source to send someone out to replace your battery, for example, and help with retention. It's a great resource. We have a question from someone who runs a nonprofit that works with students from ALICE households and wants to know what the barriers are for ALICE families to have their kids participate in enriching extracurricular activities. What would you say is most important? Transportation, time, communication? If you from your vantage point, what seems important?
If I had to pick, I think, the things that we hear at least are that oftentimes these kids are needed at home after school to help do childcare for younger siblings. And so they can't engage just simply for that reason. Sometimes it's transportation. where they've got to get the bus at a certain time and get home. But most often it's because they're needed at home to watch younger siblings.
Great. So proxy childcare.
Yep. In essence, yep. It's the way to help them save money and not have to hire someone to watch the siblings.
Great. With respect to Housing First, what are some practical ways people in this meeting today could help with this? Donations, properties, time, other things? I'll say, as a former landlord, I found it incredibly difficult to work with the financial industry to figure out how to sell my house to my tenant. So
that's a very good point. Yeah, we don't make it easy at all. The housing first is how do we get folks into housing, and it's got to be affordable. So if there are private landlords listening, please take note. We need you. We need you to be compassionate. We need you to not require 3 times the monthly rent in monthly income. I mean, there are rules that need to be bent a little bit, and to get people into homes that they're able to afford. We don't make it easy for landlords either. To be truthful, it's difficult to be a landlord too. So there are rules that are in place for a reason. But we do need folks who own homes. Make them available to these lower income families. Don't set up those barriers to entry. Is the first thing that I would say. Obviously. Money donations is important. I would tell you the money that we get into the housing sector, through United Way, we're reinvesting in these agencies who are actually doing this kind of work and getting the best outcomes. So, a little bit of money, can be pooled with other people's little bits of money to be able to make a big difference.
Thank you, Michelle. Could you speak to some of the amazing collaborations that happened in the immediate wake of the COVID shutdown between United Way and local foundations and organizations? How do you see those conversations continuing?
Yeah, that actually, if anything exciting came out of this pandemic, that was it. I distinctly remember March 16th of 2020, and we were on shutdown, and it was a Monday morning, and we got together as funders, foundations, as well as United Way on a daily basis to monitor what was going on. We operate 211 for Kent County through United Way, and so we know on a daily basis we were watching to see what are the phone calls coming in for, what are the needs from the community. Most of those in the first couple of weeks were for food. And so we knew where the needs were and what agencies we needed to partner with. But very quickly, within 4 weeks, we had raised over $3.3 million to go back out to those on the front lines who were meeting the emergency needs of the people in this community. United Way shifted from our typical grant cycle. We were making grants within 48 hours. A decision within 24 hours and funding within 24 hours, so that money was getting into the hands of these nonprofits to help the clients within 2 days. And that was unlike anything we had ever seen before. And so within those 4 weeks, we had allocated that $3.3 million back out, and it was going toward the needs that we knew were happening in the community. So more than ever before, we had our finger on the pulse. What's exciting about all of this is that these funder meetings, while not daily anymore, we still meet weekly, and working on collaborations between all of us and in understanding what are the needs of the community and how are we going to respond. And clearly each foundation has their own mission and their goals, but there are some things that we can band together to do collectively to really start moving the needle in this community, and that's what's exciting to see.
Well, Michelle, I want to thank you for taking time to join us today, and I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for our hosts at the Calvin Center for Innovation and Business. There's Bob Ames to address you directly and wrap up. Bob, we have some tough questions about pretty systemic economics in the chat that are going to, I think, blow the scope of this conversation. Maybe we should host another to get into those hard economics details.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Neil. There's this, as you start to unpack this, it's clearly one of those complex problems that has many facets to it that most of us are not well acquainted with. And so I just again, I want to thank you, Michelle, for first of all of the work that you and Neil and that the United Way has done to, first of all, do this research, and secondly, just to raise awareness of not only the scope of the problem, but the complexity and as you said early on, the immediacy of it. The fact that this isn't the people that are sleeping under the overpass. These are our neighbors. These are our friends. These are our family members who are struggling to meet what appears to be just an increasing level of expense to take care of the basics. So I appreciate your help in just making us more aware of it, but also in inspiring us to try to do something about it. And good suggestion, Neil. Maybe we can rope Michelle into a broader discussion than this format allows today, because I know a lot of people are interested in doing something about it, not just talking about it. So thank you, Michelle. We just really appreciate you, and we appreciate how God is using you in this new way in this chapter of your career and your life. Thanks for sharing your time with us. Thank you, too, to Neil Carlson from the Center for Social Research for moderating and for introducing Michelle today. And I want to remind all of you that we're going to have another one of these events done the same way. So no problems with dietary restrictions because we won't be serving breakfast. But the next segment of our Executive Breakfast series will be airing on March 9th. And in that event, coming on the heels of the Super Bowl, it's appropriate, right? We're going to be focused on the future of sport. And we're going to have our own version of the rivalry going on here. We'll be featuring Dr. Chad Carlson from Hope College and our own Dr. Brian Bolt from Calvin University in that segment on the future of sport. So thank you again for joining us this morning. We look forward to seeing you in another month, and stay warm out there and have a great day. Thank you.